Hi, my name is Sahil Talreja. I'm from Section E and my roll number is 2401372. So today I'll be talking on the topic of inflation and cost of living. Starting off with, we will first look into the definition of inflation. What do you mean by inflation? Inflation is the rate at which the general price level of goods and services increases over time. So it takes into account how the prices of goods and services are increasing over time and at what rate they are increasing. Uh, we will now look into the part of the purchasing power of an individual, how the purchasing power of an individual changes over time when the price level actually increases. So, thus, we take into account how much their salaries, their incomes should also increase with time when it comes to inflation coming into picture. Now, we look at the types of inflation, starting over demand pull inflation. In this, we take into account when there is excess demand but very less supply. Thus, in this case, prices are exponentially because supply is very less but demand is a lot. Second being cost push inflation. When the rising cost of production pushes the prices level up. Thus, we take into account when the production capacity of a place is increasing and prices level also goes up. Third being built-in inflation. When your prices increase, via which your wages also increases, thus balancing the entire factor. Now, coming on to how inflation affects the cost of living. Firstly, we'll understand what do you mean by cost of living. Cost of living basically refers to the amount of money needed to cover the basic expenses such as housing, food, transportation, healthcare, etc. When we talk about these factors, we take into account inflation. How inflation makes these necessities more and more expensive with time. So it also differentiates the factor of how people's ability to afford them, how the purchasing power of people reduces over time. Starting off with, we will talk about housing. When your mortgage rate increases, your rent of your house increases, and other factors increase, the purchasing power of an individual reduces. Now coming on to groceries, food and groceries. When your transportation cost increase, when your production cost increase, the food price level goes up, and thus this directly impacts the consumers. Then, talking about energy and utilities. With time, we see that gas, electricity, and fuel are becoming more and more expensive. Thus, the direct impact again comes down to the consumers. Coming on to the healthcare part. After COVID, we see that healthcare expenses have increased a lot, and especially due to which medical costs have risen. Your insurance premiums have also gone up a lot. And now talking about inflation, with inflation coming into picture, healthcare costs have even increased a lot. Now, how inflation has impacted us. When we talk about salaries and wages, if our wages don't rise with inflation, the purchasing power again decline. When we talk about investments, savings and investments, if considering inflation is on an exponential increase, our savings and investments should also rise with time so that we can combat inflation. Now, talking about debts and loans. Okay, if the prices are increasing and your interest rates are going up, how will you tackle paying interest on loans with time? So this is how inflation impacts us. Now, how should we cope up with inflation? When it comes to our incomes and your salaries receiving, we should always plan a budget wisely so that we can cut the unnecessary expenses and prioritize what is needed at the most. Second being, you should invest smartly. We should try to invest in such a way that our income, our investments are yielding interest more than the inflation rates. Thus, we see that that'll be the difference which will help us in tackling inflation and also help us living a better life. With also coming into income increases, we should also ensure that our incomes are rising more than the inflation rate so that we can easily combat inflation. Now, coming on to the last part, we should also look at negotiating expenses wherever possible, like loans, rent, etc. Thus, in this case, we can easily combat inflation.